For this tutorial, we're going to talk a little bit about sketch constraints and how to constrain something. So in order to complete this successfully, you're going to need this file, which is called the sketch constraints.ipt. If you're working on the warm-up, this file is located in the warm-up called sketch constraints.ipt, or another place maybe that your instructor has put it. So make sure that you download that after you've opened up Inventor. So let's talk a little bit about constraints. So there's going to be two types of constraints that we're going to use in Inventor. One of them is called geometric constraints, and one of them is called dimensional constraints. So just taking a step back, a constraint is going to be something that limits or restricts the movement of something. And so a geometric constraint, which is what we're going to talk about here, it's going to restrict the motion that can be made by a piece of geometry. So restricting something moving left to right, up and down, or being able to rotate a certain way. So let's start by editing this sketch here. So everything is on a 2D sketch, and we can actually go in and edit that by right-clicking on Sketch 1 in your browser and clicking on Edit Sketch. And once I do that, it's going to change my view to the top view. Again, I can do a zoom all here, or I can just click on the top surface of my view cube and it'll bring everything into one view. So I'm actually going to zoom in over here, and I want to show you a couple of things. So there's a way to view all of your constraints that you currently have, and you can do that by right-clicking and showing all of your constraints, or pressing F8 on your keyboard. So let's do that. So a lot of these things are fixed, and that's what this little lock is. It's the fixed constraint. But you also have a lot of other constraints that we're going to apply. So those are located up here in your Sketch tab on the Constrain panel. So if you look up there, there's a bunch of different options, and these are all geometric constraints. So there's your lock. That's actually going to fix something in place so that it can't move. We're probably not going to use the fix a whole lot, but we'll use some of the other ones. So for this one, we want to apply a horizontal constraint. But I want to look and see what the actual constraints are on this object presently. So a way that I can do that is by showing all of the degrees of freedom. And so I can right-click somewhere in the graphic window and click Show All Degrees of Freedom. And then it's going to pull up for my entire sketch, and it's going to show how I can move certain shapes or points or lines throughout my sketch. So this point right here, I can move up, down, left, right, which means that the other point can move up, down, left, right, and that means that this center point right here, since it's fixed in place, it's able to rotate. So I'm able to rotate it either clockwise or counterclockwise. Well, so there's nothing constraining it other than this fixed point right here. So I'm going to apply a constraint and restrict it to only be a horizontal line. So a way that I can do that is by clicking to enable the horizontal constraint up here in the ribbon, and then I'm going to click on my line, and it's going to then lock this in to be a horizontal line. So also notice that my arrows have now changed to where I can only move my points here left and right. So right now I am still engaged in the horizontal feature, or the horizontal constraint. If I press escape on my keyboard, or I can right click and escape here, then I can go in here and I can move it, and you can see that it can still I can still move these left to right. So I can do the same thing over here with a vertical constraint. So it's pretty much the same line, it still has the same type of movement, but I'm going to restrict its movement so that it's only a vertical line now. So I'm going to go over to the vertical constraint and click on this line, and now it's vertical, and I can see the vertical constraint here is applied to this line. And the same thing over here, I now see that it has a horizontal constraint there. If you want to get rid of these so you don't see all the constraints, you can right click. I'm going to escape first, you can right click and you can hide all of your constraints, or press F9, and that will make them all disappear. You can also hide the degrees of freedom, but I'm going to keep those up since they might be helpful in applying some of the other constraints. So I'm going to let you figure out and kind of play around with this and see if you can figure out some of these other constraints. If you're not sure what a constraint is, just roll your mouse over the constraint in the toolbar or in the ribbon. So for the collinear, if you're not sure what that means, roll up here until you find something that looks like collinear, and then just read a little bit about it. So a collinear is going to cause two or more line segments or an ellipse to lie on the same line. So it's going to line them up to be in line. So they're then going to match up. So play around with that. Make sure you click on the constraint first and then click on what you want. And you can also look down here and it will kind of guide you on what it's looking for. So it says select the first line, and then it says select the second line, and I can click on that, and I've now applied that constraint. So go to it, try and figure out the last three, and make sure you can show Mr. Cowsbeak for credit.